Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our coaching hats and opening up the manager's playbook together. Look, stepping into a manager role, it's not just a fancy title change or nice little bump in pay. It is an entirely new ballgame with very real human stakes. You are now fundamentally responsible for the livelihoods, the professional growth, and honestly, the daily sanity of your team members. And nowhere, literally nowhere, do these stakes peak higher than during performance evaluations. So get focused, grab a coffee, because we're going to look at exactly how this playbook says to master this whole process. Okay, let's dive into this with a hard truth from the source material right out of the gate. If the review surprises them, you've already failed. Take a second to let that sink in. As a coach, as a manager, the absolute highest stakes conversation you have all year should contain absolutely nothing your team member doesn't already know. If they hear something totally unexpected, the failure isn't theirs for not being a mind reader, it's yours. Which brings us to Section 1, the high stakes of management. To truly understand why performance reviews so often go completely off the rails, we kind of have to cut through the standard corporate jargon and look at what actually motivates your team. I know, you'll read shelves of leadership books insisting that vision, mission, and personal growth are the things that really move people to do their best work. And sure, those things absolutely matter. But here's the unvarnished reality we just need to accept as managers. Those lofty ideals, they really only matter after someone is completely satisfied with what they're being paid. For most people, especially early in their careers, the paycheck is the primary motivator. It's just the cost of entry. I mean, just notice where the best paid engineers in the world actually work: OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and Meta. If a lofty mission alone were enough to keep top talent, a company like Google wouldn't need to hand out hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get people to organize the world's information, right? The mission is super real, but the massive paycheck is what gets people in the door and keeps them there. And because that money is decided during performance evaluations, it makes that single process the absolute most loaded conversation you are going to have all year long. So what happens when that loaded conversation goes wrong? Well, welcome to the busiest season for escalations. The source material points out that evaluation season is exactly when a manager's year gets the hardest. Suddenly, your inbox fills up with complaints from people who genuinely cannot wrap their heads around how their quote-unquote great year turned into a poor rating. And the single biggest cause of this whole mess? It's almost never weak performance or some stingy corporate budget. No, it's a massive mismatch in expectations between the manager and the team member. Moving into Section 2, the surprise is the betrayal. So, the crucial point is understanding the deep psychological impact when these expectations clash. Look, when someone escalates to HR or complains after a bad review, they're rarely just angry about the rating itself. Look at this quote from the source. That gap between what they assumed and what you decided is the real injury. They're furious because they worked hard all year, genuinely believing they were doing exactly what was needed, only to feel totally ambushed. The poor rating is just the surface level stuff. The real betrayal is that silent gap in communication. Which brings us to the number 11. By the time you sit down in that evaluation room, your team members should basically be able to predict their rating to within a hair. If they're surprised, even a pleasant surprise honestly, you didn't fail in that 30-minute meeting. You failed in the 11 months before it. And just to be clear, the goal isn't to artificially hand everyone a glowing review just to keep the peace, not at all. It's to do the work year-round so the review contains literally zero new information. All right, Section 3, moving beyond basic KPIs. Now I know exactly what a lot of managers immediately say in their own defense here. But everyone on my team has clearly defined KPIs. Let's talk about exactly why relying on that metric alone is totally insufficient. Step into the manager's shoes for a second and just consider this scenario. Let's say a team member completely blows past all their operational targets. They are just crushing the numbers, but they're incredibly difficult to work with, super dismissive of peers, and consistently 10 minutes late to every single meeting. What rating does that actually earn? Does it meet expectations? Is it severely below? If you don't have a confident answer right now, I guarantee your team doesn't either. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of the unwritten layer. KPIs are fantastic for dictating what to deliver, but you know what? They say almost nothing about how. Like, how quickly do you expect them to respond to a client email? What's your expected standard of polish on a slide deck? How do you expect people to treat each other in the hallway when no one is formally grading them? This unwritten layer is exactly where most evaluation disputes actually live. And honestly, it's the part managers almost never bother to spell out. Let's fix that. Section 4, setting the 3 bars. To fix this invisible gap, we need a tactical playbook. We have to make the invisible rules completely visible. The simplest and honestly most effective way to do this is to define 3 distinct performance bars right from the get-go. Bar number 1 is the floor. This is what met expectations actually means in daily practice. Bar number 2 is good, which is the specific output that earns a strong review. And bar number 3 is promoted. Those are the exact results and behaviors that put someone in line for the next level up. As a manager, you have to clearly define all 3 of these. But here's an absolutely critical warning we're discovering for all you managers out there. Name the floor. Don't just describe the ceiling. Most managers will happily describe what it takes to get promoted, but they completely avoid naming the floor. And that is entirely backwards. The floor is the most dangerous line to leave unspoken because it's the exact boundary separating a perfectly fine year from a terrible rating. Think about it. If your team member knows exactly where the floor sits, they almost never fall through it by accident.
Which leads perfectly into Section 5, the year-round management habit.
Setting those bars in January is a great first step, right? But expectations set once are pretty much entirely forgotten by March. You cannot just set it and forget it. You have to execute this playbook as a recurring habit. Step 1, make setting the bars a two-way conversation. Your private sense of basic might be someone else's exceptional, so you need to lay out your expectations and actually listen. Getting agreement at the start makes the rating defensible at the end. Step 2, revisit these bars quarterly, adjust them when priorities inevitably shift, and tell people plainly if they're drifting toward the floor. And finally, step 3, write a quick 2-line note after every single check-in. Now, why is writing it down so absolutely vital? The playbook puts it perfectly, not to build a case against anyone, to build a shared memory. When you jot down just a simple note after a check-in, you ensure that when evaluation season finally arrives, neither of you is sitting there trying to reconstruct an entire year from hazy feelings. You're both literally reading from the exact same written record. I promise you, that simple habit alone makes performance review season so much more survivable. Now, let's be totally honest with each other as coaches. Even with all of this prep, sometimes the honest rating is just a low one. It happens. But there is a massive psychological difference between someone saying, "I'm disappointed," and "I'm blindsided." "I'm disappointed" means a person is absorbing news they already half expected. "I'm blindsided" means they feel completely deceived. You can't always control if someone's performance earns a low rating, but you absolutely control whether it lands as a total shock or as anticipated news. At the end of the day, a performance review should be the ultimate anticlimax. If your team member can walk in and guess their rating before you even say a word, you have done your real job. So I want to leave you with this final provocative question to really reflect on. When was the last time someone on your team was genuinely surprised by their rating? And looking back, honestly, what had you left unsaid in the months before? Think about that for a bit. Do the unglamorous work all year, have the hard conversations early, and stop relying on surprises. That is your playbook. Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and we will see you next time.